So then, as we watch the two doubles come down the course, I believe we've returned to the start, and it's a heat of the academic aspirational eights, and it's Oxford Brookes up against Bath University. Of course, Brookes will be well known, well versed to anybody who follows rowing in the UK. They are a powerhouse on the student circuit and looking pretty tidy as they come out of the shadows of Temple Island here, Zoe.
Yeah, I mean, this Brookes crew look like they've got over a length lead, basically off the start, which is incredibly impressive. And if you just look about how tidy they look, they're really moving together.
Occasion.
The drone shot from above is great for that. You can see, just how nice their catch timing is and how well drilled this crew is. This looks pretty impressive.
I think they carry all the hallmarks of an Oxford Brookes crew in that their catches are lightning quick. There's no excess energy wasted out the front of the stroke. They're straight on it and moving through the water, and then they give themselves plenty of time to recover as they come back up the slide. But they are in total control of this race.
Yeah, and this is a very nice place to be for a crew. You can relax a little bit. You can find your feet, especially if this is your first race or your first side-by-side race at the regatta. It gives you a chance just to relax and take it in and get used to it and, get ready for the races coming up. They do still look like they're pushing along at quite a high rate. They haven't taken anything for granted, that's for sure. They're still really racing this.
I don't think you would at this stage. You're only about a third of the course down. You haven't reached the barrier yet. I think it's still advisable to keep the rate up and pay respect to your opposition. And Bath, of course, have had some really good results in the last few years on the men's and women's side. They've moved scullers and athletes through to the GB system, and they're a growing, developing sort of organisation. But unfortunately, I think they've just come up against a better crew on the day.
Yeah, and it's difficult in side-by-side racing here, within the booms, because once you're behind, you're getting washed from the crew in front, and, the umpire doesn't necessarily have much control over what the crew in front is doing. So not necessarily a comfortable place to be or an easy place to row.
No, not at all. But actually looking at Brookes now, it sort of brings memories back of paddling down the Henley course. I never had the luxury of paddling a Henley race. I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
I have.
I imagine it's a pretty pleasant one.
It is a pleasant one, yes. I think it's difficult because it's difficult to balance, wanting to conserve your energy for the next race. You don't want to do too much for no reason. You also don't want to put yourself too far ahead. You still want to be respectful to your opposition. So it's kind of difficult balancing these things. You also don't want to sit at rate 18. The other difficult thing for crews is actually sometimes when you take the rate down, but you're still trying to push really hard, you actually do yourself more damage for your later races, because you might be going a bit slower because you've taken the rate down, but actually you're still working very hard. You're doing sort of more like a power stroke, and actually that can really take a lot out of you. So you've got to be quite careful about how you manage that. If you're ahead and you think you're in a comfortable position, how you make sure you actually get the most out of it. You don't want to just paddle it for no reason. You want to still use it, whether it's using it to visualize your next race, to say, okay, well, here's where we'll put our big push in, or, this is where we want to be really confident. This is where we want to be strong as we come into the finish. I think you've got to make sure you use the experience and you don't just let it pass you by.
I think sort of from your perspective as a former Cox, how much is that down to you? How much of responsibility do you take to sort of manage your crew and ensure that they're not burning their engines too quickly?
I mean, my feeling is always prepare for everything. And the further I got through my coxing career, the more I wanted to do that, weirdly enough, even though I was more and more experienced. I want to have a conversation with the crew. I want to have a conversation with the coach. And I want to say, what if? If this is the situation, how are we going to respond? Because actually, I think it's very easy to put a lot of responsibility on the cox, which is unnecessary. Actually, the crew should take some responsibility. The coach should take some responsibility. Yes, the cox is the one making the decision in the moment, but actually, you need to have a plan. You need to be, have some idea of what you're working off.
Absolutely. I think Brookes coasting away with that one.
Should we go with that?
So apologies for the little hiatus from us. We were just sort of figuring out what's going on, who the runners and riders were in this one, but my understanding is it's the University of Rhode Island on the Berkshire Station and Edinburgh University on the Buckinghamshire Station. As they passed us, it was the crew from the USA with about a length lead on Edinburgh University, but both crews looking pretty tidy, pretty neat in what has to be said is perfect conditions here at Henley Women's Regatta, but I think maybe just a little bit more horsepower in the crew from the USA.
Yeah, the Rhode Island crew look pretty punchy. I think you're right. I think both crews look quite tidy. Both crews look well drilled. And actually both crews are rowing an almost identical rate at the moment. Maybe Rhode Island ever so slightly higher than Edinburgh. But Rhode Island, yeah, just holding control of it. Perhaps a little bit more push through the water, a little bit more aggression. Just sitting about a length up at the moment on Edinburgh University.
So the University of Rhode Island making their way down the course, and it has to be said, look at the spread of that. That's Henley Women's Regatta in a picture. Send that to your nan. That's on a postcard. Absolutely beautiful shot as the 2 8s make their way down the course. Now, I had a debate the other week with a fellow colleague, a rowing enthusiast, and it was about which is the better boat to actually look at full tilt. It's always been the quad for me, but as we look at those 2 8s making their way down this stretch, it's an incredible sight.
Yeah, categorically the 8.
To be fair, I'm not really asking a fair audience here. Having cock
biased.
There's probably not a lot of room for a cox in a coxless quad.
No.
But yeah.
I just think there's something special about the 8. I think it's not just the speed aspect, obviously it being the fastest boat, but also the fact that you get 9 people working together and your coach, 10 people, 11 people maybe. It's that whole thing, everyone working together. I just think there's something really special about it, and it's always really been something that's excited me.
I can imagine winning in an 8. There's no feeling quite like that, crossing the line with, as you say, 8 of your crewmates in perfect unison. But certainly the Rhode Island crew, this is actually their B crew here at the regatta today. They have established a margin of control over this race as they come down towards what is about 2/3 of the way through the course. The University of Edinburgh putting in what looks like a little bit of a push, trying to claw back the deficit, but I think that's going to be in vain.
I don't know. I'm not sure this is a done and dusted race. I think it looks like Rhode Island getting a little bit scrappier there, and actually Edinburgh holding their form a bit better. So I wouldn't be surprised when we go past to see Edinburgh having put in a little bit of distance there.
Yeah, both crews rowing well, but as they come past that static shot, Edinburgh just about creeping onto contact, holding onto contact, but I think the crew from the USA have control. So if we move back up to the start, we will keep an eye on the finish of that race to see if it turns into anything more interesting, but we'll move back up to the start for another heat of the academic aspirational 8s, and it's a Bath University, Bristol University composite on the Berkshire Station, and University College Dublin ladies on the Buckinghamshire Station. You can see the disparate colours of Bristol and Bath just in the mainstay of your shot there, and they've established, already a length lead.
Yeah, that looks like a really, really nice start from them. And composite cruise is always a bit of a difficult one, because in theory you might be taking your best view from here and your best view from there, but sometimes it can actually, slow you down for a while at first, because you've got to get together, you've got to make sure you're on the same page, you've got to make sure that everyone is, especially off a standing start, everyone's really doing the same thing. So actually sometimes it can take a bit of time to get together and make sure that you're actually getting the best out of all the individual athletes. But these guys they're pretty well drilled, and they look like they're rowing a really nice rhythm there as well.
And I assume the premise of a composite is because you believe you can generate more speed from bringing athletes from other clubs into your boat. But then there is that sort of added disadvantage of the fact that you have to then embed the 2 different styles that you might have, having
absolutely.
been coached.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's always going to be a risk, but these guys look like they've made the right decision.
Yeah, no trouble here. They've got clear water over their opposition, University College Dublin ladies crew. Yeah, about 2 lengths to the composite. I think barring anything too disastrous, I think the composite from Bristol and Bath universities respectively will be progressing through to the next round. Of course, it is the commentator's curse. Whenever you call a race early, the result tends to be overturned or reversed. But I'm going to stick my neck on the line and say that composite look like they're in control. It's always interesting actually to watch the earlier heats of an event, because then you can sort of spot who you think might be going far, who you think will progress, and actually start to match up the crews in your head and work out what I'm really looking forward to seeing. For instance, the Bath-Bristol composite up against, the crew from the University of Rhode Island.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the nice things looking through the draw and seeing, well, where are the big matches going to come, because it's not always the final ultimately. Sometimes you get that top race on the Saturday or on the Sunday morning. You never know.
So as we watch the two crews make their way down the course, just a quick rundown of what we've got coming up. So we've got one more heat of the academic aspirational 8s coming up, followed by the equivalent in the coxless 4s. We've got some more academic aspirational 8s after that, followed by some more coxless 4s. It's almost like they've done this in order. And then we've got some singles, some more 8s, and some more singles as we progress on into the afternoon. It's a very relaxed style, it has to be said. Just watching that composite make their way down the course, and I think moving back to the start now, we can see that the next heat is underway. This between the United Hospitals A crew on the Berkshire station and Glasgow University Boat Club on the Buckinghamshire station. Of course, United Hospitals closest to your picture there. Glasgow with those black blades, just hugging the shadows of Temple Island. Hard to call this one. Both crews with a little bit of domestic form. United Hospitals is always an interesting one. Quite often come to Henley Women's Regatta and produce some pretty good crews every year. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any pedigree here. But you can see on the top right-hand side of your picture, the composite from Bristol and Bath, just rounding off that race, their heat. They'll be progressing through to the next round, which I believe is the quarterfinals. So I think we'll look at the drone shots here. It's Glasgow against United Hospitals at the moment. Zoe, it's a pretty good race.
Yeah, this is the closest race I think we've seen so far today. You can see really, two seats in it at most. Glasgow just holding control there over University Hospitals. And it's always interesting to see what happens as you come off the end of the island, because that's where the wind first starts to hit you. You do tend to get a little bit of shadow down the island. And then you can see quite a change, making sure that, you come into that little bit windier aspect and just stay sharp and stay focused. It's easy to let it go there. And these crews getting quite close together now.
Yeah, they are converging a little bit, it has to be said. Certainly an excellent race. Very little to choose between them. You wonder what's going through their heads at this stage. I'm sure a lot of them would have wished the race would be over by now, or certainly as a contest, but no such chance. And I think you were right, Zoe. A couple of seats in this at the moment.
Looks like University Hospitals have just pushed out into the middle a little bit, getting quite close there to Glasgow, but looks like Glasgow just starting to take a little bit more control of it. Just starting to stretch out in front. It's not happening fast though, they're just inching away there.
Yeah, I have to say, just as that Glasgow crew came swinging past us, it looked like there was a bit of a push on. The rate went up a couple of pips, and they just stretched out a little bit, trying to establish a margin of control over this heat of the academic aspirational 8s.
One of the hardest things about racing at Henley Women's, actually, especially if you've been racing 2Ks all year, is making sure you're prepared for the race to be shorter. I remember being in a race in a very experienced Elite 8 once, and we were comfortably ahead. of another crew, and someone caught a crab in our boat, and it wouldn't normally have been a problem, but in this case there's just so little time to make it up. We were quite near the finish, and actually we ended up having quite a scramble to try and get back through. So you've really got to make sure that you're prepared for that. You know where you are on the course, and you don't let the race get away from you and suddenly realize that you're closing down on the finish line very fast.
I think in any racing environment, as you say, a crab is a disastrous sort of negative thing to happen, but when it comes to side-by-side, one-on-one racing, a crab can totally end the race.
Absolutely, because that's the time, if I was coxing a losing crew and the winning crew caught a crab, that would be absolutely the time that I would say, right now, this is it. This is our moment. This is where we need to try and take advantage. So, if you've got a switched on cox or switched on whoever's making the calls in a coxless boat, then you can really, really capitalize on a mistake like that.
Still a pretty good race. I think Glasgow, actually, this has not been a race where they've jumped out. This has been a race, the war of attrition. I think probably the best